Did he get hot or did he figure it out? Because I can't get that.
Hey, so quick disclaimer before we get to the episode. This NFC North preview was recorded last week on August the 7th. So not covered is Caleb Williams and the Bears' first preseason game that wasn't the Hall of Fame game, episode 2 of Hard Knocks, and JJ McCarthy's injury that we still aren't that clear on. If you are watching the YouTube version of this, the full NFC North preview is available via podcast, link in the description. The rest of the visuals will come out throughout the week. And disclaimer number 3, since Usayd is a Bears writer, we went very Bears heavy, as you can see by the timestamp. So the rest of the NFC North, I owe you a more in-depth preview. That will be out on Saturday, August 17th. Same old channels, same old things. So that's why you subscribe to keep up with the page. All right, bet. Let's get into the episode. On to the Green Bay Packers 2023. Much to the chagrin of Bears fans, it looks like they got another quarterback in Jordan Love. And this 2 weeks ago or so, they paid him as such. They go 9-8, started the season off a little shaky as well. And then somewhere around week 11, it looked like Jordan Love put it all together, took him to the playoff, and put absolute belt to butt cheek of the Dallas Cowboys in that playoff game, and were 1 or 2 possessions away from stealing the game on the road against the 49ers. So I will ask you, what's more likely for the Packers? That they make it to the Super Bowl or they miss the playoffs altogether this year?
I mean, that's kind of 2 incredibly opposite things. And it's a really good question.
The point.
But yeah, I would say this. I think just looking at Green Bay, the tough part about them is there's a bunch of just dudes on that roster that are pretty good football players, right? Like Jaden Reed's one of them, real good. Christian Watson, a guy that I was high on when he was coming out of North Dakota State University. But I kind of look at the entire thing and I say there's a legit shot that maybe they do go ahead and miss the playoffs. And that's because the schedule for them just objectively gets harder, right? You are looking at going into year 2 of the Jordan Love era, which, by the way, during the season, I do a weekly NFC North recap on Bear Report. And one of the massive things that I had said was, hey, the Packers at the first half of the year, they're struggling. November and December, they suddenly found their mojo and found their groove. But I look at this Green Bay schedule and I say it is tough because you have that game against the Eagles all the way in Brazil. Indianapolis is a team that just seems to be incredibly highly motivated with Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen. The Vikings, yes, they're breaking in a new quarterback in Sam Darnold, as well as a rookie in JJ McCarthy. But hey, the Vikings had a really good defense last year, and Brian Flores is a wizard as his defense. But I do ultimately think that there's a shot that Green Bay does miss the playoffs this year, just because of some of the competition that they have to go ahead and play.
You alluded to it when you first started. My main question for Green Bay's team, but specifically offense outside of Jordan Love, who is their number 1 receiver / do they need one? Because I'm breaking down the red zone targets. Reed, Dobbs, and Watson, they're all in that 18 to 14 range. First downs, I think Jaden Reed had the most at, I have the number in front of me. Romeo Dobbs had the most at 41 on that team. For reference, Tyreek Hill led the league at 83. So that's the number 1 receiver of all number 1 receivers. And according to the players of the NFL, the best player in the league. He's getting that amount, and their number 1 receiver is at half that amount. So if you had to guess, who's going to emerge as that number 1 guy, or is that something that they just don't need to worry about?
I mean, they do need someone to emerge as a number 1 guy, and it's simply because the Bears have 3 really good wide receivers. The Lions have a pretty loaded wide receiver room as well with Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Vikings got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So there's a legit argument that the Packers actually have the worst receiving room in the league. Now, to me, I look at it and say it's probably Jaden Reed who's going to go ahead and is going to emerge as the number 1 target. As much as I want to say Christian Watson should be the guy, I mean, he's also had issues staying healthy and being in the lineup. So there is that kind of thing where you look at Christian Watson for the 2022 draft, and he again was a highly touted receiver prospect and what was a pretty good receiver class. But unfortunately, some of the production's been there for Christian, but there hasn't necessarily been this sort of, I want to say, consistency that's been there. And then I also look at Romeo Dobbs and say there is a chance that, he pops off as well.
Back to Love. So when he caught fire the second half of the season, I had to get these because I knew the numbers were great. I didn't know they were this good. So from week 11 on, he was blitzed the most in the league, 41% of his dropback, which is insane. Against that, number 1 in total touchdowns, number 1 in total passing yards, number 1 in total EPA per play, number 1 touchdown interception ratio, second in success rate. Y'all get the point. Incredible from that point on. But it does beg the question, did he get hot or did he figure it out? Because I can't get that last throw against the 49ers, which was just like his brain cut off. I can't get that out of my head as I look at what Jordan Love was the second half of that season.
Yeah, I would say it's a bit of both. Number one, he kind of got hot, but then also number two, you could make the argument that he did figure it out just slightly. There is this sense of Jordan that I get watching Jordan is that he certainly got more comfortable managing the Packers offense and running it. But you also look at it and say, all right, he's far from kind of being the executive field general that Aaron Rodgers or even Brett Favre were. There is still a lot of growing to go ahead and do. And teams now have a full year of tape on him. So as generic as it is to sit here and say, well, teams are going to start to figure him out, there's also kind of that part of, yeah, teams are going to figure him out. And there's a legit shot where, I look at Green Bay's offseason moves and I say, well, you have A.J. Dillon, you signed Josh Jacobs to a big contract. You are going to be running a lot of play action just to get Jordan out of the pocket to scheme things open. Because the guy to me is not this prototypical pocket passer. But to go back to the question, I mean, he semi figured it out, but he also semi got hot. Because again, it's like, you could make the same argument with the Houston Texans. Did they actually figure it out with CJ, or did CJ actually get, incredibly hot at the right time? And sometimes in the league, if we're going to be honest, I mean, there's always that one team with that one quarterback every year that magically gets hot and is able to figure it out.
I can see it both ways as well. I mean, for his sake, just because he just signed that big deal, I hope it's not we're week 4 into the season and there's not the bunch of headlines of, are the Packers having buyer's remorse already? I'm really hoping it's not that. Since we brought up headlines, same question for the Packers. Day after the Super Bowl, you predict the Packers headline would be what?
I would say the headline would probably be that the Packers have a lot more building to do, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Because, yeah, they have a pretty good offense, but also the reality of it all is that they can't go ahead and they're not, to me, yeah, they have 3 decent receivers, but they don't have that elite wide receiver, right? There's no Jordy Nelson, there's no Devontae Adams. Like Christian Watson in 9 games last year only had 28 receptions. The year before he had 41 receptions playing in 14 games. So it's kind of just this scenario where, they don't necessarily have that dynamic, explosive attack through the air to really go ahead and justify taking a massive step forward. They are incredibly well coached though, which makes up for a lot of their mistakes, but they're still not going to win the Super Bowl this year. And I don't think if there's a team that I had to pick to win the Super Bowl this year in the NFC North, it'd hands down be the Detroit Lions.
And we will get there. We have one more team first.